Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to Sondering Tarot. Or if you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. Today we're doing a VR. This is for Lisa and Peggy Papez. They did a live where they, which I watched the playback for, where they did 21 tarot questions. So we're going to go through all these questions. For those that are unaware of the tag or just finding it and need the questions as prompts, they're in the description box down below. Please go ahead and copy and paste. Do your own VR. If you want to, go ahead, tag me in it. I'll even watch it maybe 5 days after you see this video that I watch it because I'm busy, but I will go ahead and watch it. However, I'm going to go ahead and get started with question number 1. I will be moving as quickly as possible because there is 21 questions, and even if I spend, you know, a minute or two on each, we're looking at, you know, over a half hour for video, and YouTube hates that. So let's get started. And I'm gonna end up knocking a whole bunch of decks over. I'm sorry if you heard that. What is a deck? They'll have to pry out of my cold dead hands. This is probably going to be the Mermaid Tarot for me. This is my water element deck. I grew up watching Little Mermaid. I love mermaids. Always have. I am a water sign, for those that are unfamiliar with my channel. So this deck right here is very much in my element. It's pretty, it's colorful, it's ocean themed. This is a deck that I can grab at any point and read it. I also like a lot of the artwork out of this deck, which for those that are watching my, what is it, 22 favorites, majors and minors series that I've been putting up lately, you'll see a lot of cards out of this particular deck. All right, and we're gonna move on. What is your guilty pleasure deck? Okay, this is a heavy hitter because I have more than one guilty pleasure deck. However, there is some nostalgia that I have growing up as an 80s baby for the Never-Ending Story. So to find the Never-Ending Tarot as a majors only deck, and one of the basically the only majors only deck I have in my collection currently on Etsy, was, oh my god, it was mind-blowing. So even if I did not connect to this deck, even if I didn't have a purpose for it, and here is the shop for those that are curious about it. I also have a flip through of this deck on my channel. But even if I had no use for this particular deck, I was going to keep this. I was going to keep it. Just for, you know, nostalgia purposes. And it's lovely. You get some of the images from the movie. You get a title. You get keywords. You get numbers. And for a majors only, it's fabulous. And some of the choices I agree with. Some of them I don't. But it works. And believe it or not, the strength of this deck, at least in my hands, is love. And I love using this for love readings, for relationship readings. It is fabulous in that aspect. So I will not part with this, even if I no longer find a use for it, or if I find a deck in my collection that does the job better, whether that is a full tarot deck or a majors only. The only thing I don't like is the packaging. This little sleeve here is the bane of my existence. Maybe one of these days I will get a bag for this deck. All right, and we're going to move on to question 3. What's the deck you wish existed? Okay, now as much as I want a deck that has all of my aesthetics in it, with all the creatures that I want in it, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the Earth, Moon, and Shadow Oracle. Yes, I realize that this is a tarot video, but there is something in this deck that I want to show you. Serafina gave us these lovely spread cards. Here's her backings. There's a nice border. She's got a title. She's got a display. She's got questions. She made a couple cards right here with spreads to use from her deck. It's also in her guidebook. I would love a tarot and oracle deck where they are basically set up like this. An entire deck of, say, 50 to 100 cards where it's nothing but spreads like this. Get them for different placements, get them for different moon phases, get them for different subjects, and make it kind of a series where you get, sorry for the running joke, the extension packs for spreads. I feel like, okay, so here's the new moon expansion pack. We'll do one for each zodiac sign. Or, hey, here's all your solar eclipse expansion pack in every zodiac sign. Here's all the spreads that we could come up with for each and every sign, etc. I would love decks like that I could use really easily. So as much as I could say a overall tarot deck with, vampires, mermaids, etc., whatever, cats, that I could say, hey, I want these things in it and all together and have it flow and make sense. I would rather have a spread tarot where I could just literally shuffle and have my ancestors toss out the card so I know what spread I need rather than having to come up with my own or getting antsy and trying to look for one. That way I have something prepped and ready to go. All I have to do is shuffle and there it is and use it. That would be fantastic. And yes, I realize there are spread decks, but they're usually, one card and it says the past. One card, it says the future. One card and it says obstacles. One card and it says, focus, or another card that says near future. You get one word type kind of things. And you get to play around with it wherever you want and create your own spread like that. And as well as that is usable and good, I kind of like the way Serafina did it. And I would love to have decks like that. And yes, the extension pack. And I'm sorry for the running joke, but it applies. Thank you so much, Peggy. All right. Question number 4. What deck would you give to a new reader? All right, this is going to be a very basic answer because I'm going to say the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot. This is a low scare bearer deck. It's basically your traditional RWS deck that the color's been revamped so it's more vibrant, so the saturation is more even and brighter, and they've gone back and they've finished some of the line work, so it's a deck that they've touched up. I'm okay with learning with the regular RWS. An RWS clone is what I learned on. However, it wasn't the regular RWS with a traditional guidebook. So to make it easy, I would say this, just because the first deck I bought was not an RWS. In fact, it has some Thoth influences in it, and I was trying to self-learn, and that didn't work out so well. So, yes, easy peasy. That is my vote. Okay, that covers question 4. So we're moving on to 5. What deck do you want to get along with, but it just never clicked? Okay, this is going to be interesting because this is an indie deck, and it came in a pouch. Sorry, I don't have a lot of decks that come in pouches. And there is a crystal in here. There it is. This is the Divine Tarot of the Unicorn. And Lisa's probably going to remember this deck if she ever sees this video. This is a Kickstarter deck. And this has been redone with cats by the same artist. And this is a very pastel, kind of, I almost want to say cutesy deck. Yes, it does want to slide. Sorry for dropping cards. It's an RWS clone. It's got some name changes. I do like some of the choice phrases that they get for each of the cards. However, this is not my aesthetic. I bought this and backed it on Kickstarter because at the time I was asked to do a inner child reading, and I didn't have a deck for that. However, my ancestors said, that deck, that deck, that one right there, this is the deck that I needed to do that reading. However, it kind of fell short for a reading for my expectations. I haven't used it since then. I mean, horses, unicorns, these are typical childhood things, and it does take me there, but it just didn't jive as much as I would like. However, this deck is very much the aesthetic of the person that I was trying to read for, and our aesthetics are like complete opposite. So, yeah, will I find a place in my collection, in my practice for this deck? Maybe. But for right now, it is not being used. And yes, inner child work is kind of the strong point of this deck, and I have not had a big usage for inner child work myself, so this deck is definitely the answer to that question. What deck do you only keep for the art? Okay, I do use this deck. I do use this deck. And there goes the crystal on top of it. Pardon me real quick. I have to go chase a crystal. Okay. Not that I almost nearly lost that on the floor. I do use this deck. In fact, for those of you that may not follow my channel, I've used this deck a number of times on my channel for my daily tarot readings. I've also done a quick flip through, so if you want to see the whole deck, go for it. This is the Royal Dark Tarot. Louis Royal is where all the artwork is pulled from for this deck. So this is fantasy, very high nude artwork, and then somebody has taken the liberty to take his artwork and assemble it into a deck. Now, some of these make sense for the choices, some of them don't. It's just basically they've taken his artwork and jammed it into a deck. So it's not like you have traditional RWS symbolism or anything like that. I just like his artwork. It's why I bought it. Even if the choices don't make sense, I am able to read with it. Just because I know what the cards mean. It's kind of like reading with a pip deck. You got to know all the meanings of each card, regardless of what there is for art. And there you go, Lisa. If you're watching this, there's your unicorn. But even if I couldn't read with this deck, which I can, I would keep this solely for the artwork. And I love the fact that they chose the one painting he did with the dragon and books as the hair font. Anyway, as I said, there is nudity in this deck, and I've usually throw up a warning to everybody every time I use it, going, okay, if you have a problem with nudity, skip. Or, hey, let's see if YouTube will end up banning me today because I have a deck with nudity. So, I sometimes limit my usage on this deck, but this deck is not going anywhere just for the sake of the artwork. But as I said, I do use the deck, so it's not ignored. All right, so question 7. What deck did you buy because everyone else did? I technically didn't buy this deck. I just put it on my wish list because that's what I give family members, is a wish list. There's so much hype around the Green Witch. I've seen it, wasn't really drawn to it, but it was a mass market deck. It was heavily witch themed. It also has some fae throughout it. And for those of you that have never seen this deck, as soon as you see the backings, you'll probably recognize it if you don't recognize the box. But I didn't have a strong pull towards this deck to purchase it myself, or, you know, I didn't have that hard on or deck crush that most of us get of, hey, I want that, I need that, I gotta have it in hands now. You know, impulse buy, hitting the buy button in an instant, or, you know, my intuition didn't guide me towards it. There was no pull really towards this deck. And what's weird is that once I got it in hands and I could sit here and play with it, I discovered that this is one of the decks that reminds me of the season. This is my autumn deck, by the way. I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards, is the World Tree. All right. I have appreciation for this deck. I can use this deck. There's some things I like about it. There's some things I'm just like, eh. But there was no draw for this deck. I just got it because it was a popular mass market deck, and my family said, oh, well, that'll be a good Christmas gift, and they bought it for me. But this deck does remind me of autumn, even though the backings are more like Yule. It doesn't really seem to jive with the backings, but that's what it feels like to me. All right, and we're going to move on, just because this is going to be a very long video. And I'm trying not to talk too much. What deck is over your head or just baffles you? Okay, this deck is not over my head. It is not my aesthetic. It is one of the very few decks that I have that would be considered collage or mixed media, you know, kind of the decoupage look. This is the Tarot Illuminati. And some of you will probably recognize this because I've been using this deck here lately on my channel for my daily tarot readings, because it's what my ancestors have been calling for. Here's the backings. This is not my aesthetic. I felt a pull towards this deck. I do appreciate the male on the Temperance card. This has a lot of ethnic groups in it, represented by the different suits, different time periods. It's very bright. It's almost too much. I mean, there's a lot in each card. This deck can be very distracting. I call it my chaos deck for those of you that don't follow my channel. I can't always read with this deck. Sometimes it's just too bright. There's too much in each card. I get distracted. It's like seeing a squirrel. As I said, when it comes to certain types of media like this, it's not my aesthetic. However, when there's a lot of different transits or a lot of different energy going around, the reason why I call this my chaos deck is because when energy gets chaotic like that, this deck is the deck that will be able to read perfectly for me. It gets right to the point. It tells me exactly what I need to know. It's really strong in communication like that. So, like this, right now we're in the middle of an eclipse window, and my ancestors keep calling for this deck. And it's because it can make sense of all the strong, hyped energy, all the chaotic energy, all the changing transits between all of the planets right now, as well as retrograde. And it reads just fine, reads perfectly. Whereas we could have no Mercury retrograde, no eclipse season going on, nothing. And I will pick up this deck and I'll be like, huh? Say what? Huh? So I'm very limited on when and how I can use this deck. It's not that it goes over my head or that I can't use it or that I don't get it. It's just there is a certain niche when it comes to the energy for me to be able to read from this deck, for it to actually click, for me to, as a user, read from it. Which is great, because as soon as I realize, like, oh, the energy's really chaotic, I'm like, okay, I know what deck I need. So I call this my chaos deck. What deck surprised you? Okay. In fact, some of you who follow my channel are not going to be so shocked that I'm saying this. Disney's Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot deck. Okay. I did a small video over this deck because it was my surprise deck of 2022. If I remember right, that video went up right around Christmas time. If I remember right, I did a reading. I can't remember if it was a new moon or a full moon reading with this deck in December. It might have been the monthly reading too. But this is a pip deck. And this is very niche. I mean, as you can see, it's a pip deck. Most of us are familiar with this. And what is it? Inside Editions is kind of hit and miss with the quality and content of these theme decks, whether it's, you know, Hocus Pocus, Alice in Wonderland, etc. And this was the first one I got. And I wanted to play with it. I like The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's good. And the reason why this deck surprised me is because when I did that reading in December of 2022, it wasn't until after I finished the reading I went, huh, this is a pip deck. And I understood it completely, regardless of anything else. And having sat in the energy after the reading, I was like, I read more intuitively. Hey, wait a minute. I'm learning to read more intuitively. It hit me. With this deck, it hit me that not only was I reading more intuitively, but the fact that it was a pip deck didn't bother me at all. I didn't even notice that it was a pip deck. And I mean, some of these are glaringly obvious that it's a pip deck. And before this deck, I got a pip deck and decided not to use it because I didn't know the meanings, and I was not prepared to do pip decks. Didn't want to do pip decks. And then I got this deck going, oh, well, I'll give it a try. And realized I could read more intuitively, number one. And two, pip decks, maybe I can handle pip decks. Now, I've been on a mission to get another pip deck or two to test that theory of whether or not I can do pip decks or if this is a one-off thing. But this was my surprise for 2022. And if any of you else out there who's actually watching this and made it this far into the video have had that issue with pip decks where it's either a one-off thing or there was one deck that stood out that let you know that you could handle pip decks, let me know what those were. And if you have any suggestions, I would also love to hear it. All right, what deck doesn't really work for you, but you keep it because it's a collectible? Okay, we're going to drag out the box. And yes, this deck is in a box because the original box is falling apart. So it gets a special container. And it's even in a bag so it doesn't slide all over. Believe it or not, this is the very first deck I ever bought. And for those of you that recognize the backings, you're going to realize exactly why me buying this as my very first deck and trying to learn with it was not a good idea. This is the Tarot of Vampires. I love vampires. I don't mind goth things. So I thought this would be a very me deck, a very good deck to learn from. And then I got into the guidebook and started trying to learn with it and realizing this is far over my head. This is confusing. This is not working. This is not a deck for beginners. But it was the deck that I bought and was trying to learn to read with as a beginner. And that doesn't work. There's Thoth influences in this deck. There's not a lot of RWS that's obvious in this deck. And then there's the name changes. So this was not the deck for me to learn on. So I ended up buying a different deck after like 2 years of giving up on this deck and learning how to read. And then picking tarot back up and learning with a different deck. And I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this deck. It sat for 2 years being unused. It took me a week to cleanse this deck. And since then, I've used it a time or two. But I've only use it when I feel called to it. I mean, this is a good shadow deck, but yeah, we really don't jive that well. So that's really disappointing, but there it is. Maybe eventually I will find a new spot for this deck in my collection and very much end up using it more. But for right now, it's going to go in its makeshift box with its crystal. And it's just going to be something nice and pretty for me to look at and to own. Ooh, yay. Number 11. What is your favorite gilded deck? And that for me is the Broke Tarot. This is an indie deck. It's from Kickstarter. And gilding all over the box. Gilding inside the box. I mean, there's foil stamping and gilding everywhere. Even on the guidebook. So, flashy. A lot of gold. Nice edges. And as you can probably tell, I've banged the crap out of this deck because I've used it quite a lot. This is one of my shadow decks that I use quite often. More foil stamping and gilding in the cards for the titles and the numbers on it. And it's flashy. It's very gold. And I'm somebody who prefers silver. But this deck does it for me when it comes to gold, when it comes to, you know, that flash when I need it. The cards themselves are more muted, but the rest of it is very flashy, very bright, very eye-catching. And I love this deck. And it's a shame that some of it's coming off on the sides. The foiling's coming off. Oh well. We'll see how long my edging lasts on this deck. And if anybody else out there who's actually watching this video has this deck, let me know how the sides of your deck look. Because I shuffle overhand. I do not ruffle shuffle. I shuffle overhand. So those that ruffle shuffle might have different edging mistakes than mine does. Tell me where the wear and tear on your deck is. Okay, number 12. Which deck do you love but hate the cardstock? Okay. Here's another niche deck. Game of Thrones Tarot. I love this deck. I love the choices that they put for characters in here. A lot of them. I love the fact that it comes with a literal hardback guidebook. I like this box, believe it or not. It's very nice packaging. This was a really cheap deck. It was a mass market deck for when Game of Thrones came out. But can you see that wear and tear? You see all the fraying edges? I have a rip right there. Literally, right there. I've slowed down my usage on this deck. There's a piece missing right there. All this edging. Rip there, rip there, rip there, rip there, rip there, rip there. I've banged the crap out of the sides of this deck so much from shuffling that I've slowed down my usage on this deck simply because it's falling apart already. And that's a shame because I do love it. Love to use it. This is a deck that tells me about people a lot of the times. I mean, it'll tell me other things too, but it really likes to talk about people. So, I would love to continue having high usage with it, but feasibly, since edges and stuff are already tearing, it's not viable with a cardstock, which is like the cheapest, paper cardstock with the thinnest layer of gloss on it for high usage. And that's sad. That's really sad. But it is what it is. Love the deck, hate the cardstock. Will there ever be a reprint of this on better cardstock? Probably not. This was a novelty item that's Game of Thrones theme. It's not exactly something that, even though it was mass market, that is liable to be reproduced. And if it is to be fixed in any way, it's not guaranteed that it would come out looking the same. They would probably change something else to the artwork. Or if they did another deck, it'd be, you know, House of the Dragon. It would be a spin-off series. So the deck would be completely different. So to get all that deck the way it is on different cardstock, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that's disappointing. All right, what deck gives you the willies? Okay, out of every deck in my collection, there is not a single one that gives me the willies. I'm a Scorpio, so I have a very hard stomach. I can handle a lot. I have naked people. I have blood and, you know, spiders and all this other stuff amongst my decks. And nothing in any of my decks gives me the heebie-jeebies to where I have to walk away from it or say ew or to take a step back or not want to touch it. However, there's other decks out there that I'm sure exist. They're just not in my collection. So this question, I suppose, is moot for me right now, because I can't think of another deck right offhand that disgusts me enough to name off the top of my head. Number 14. What's your favorite deck for shadow work? Ooh, yes, I love this question because we have the Magical Dogs Tarot. I have several decks in my collection that are for shadow work. In fact, the Broke Tarot that I had for the gilded edges and whatnot is also a shadow work deck. However, this is the deck that is my number one for shadow work. It's colorful, it's cute, it's dog themed. There is, you know, some renaming, but this gets the point across, but it's not overly harsh. But it's firm enough that I pay attention to it. So this is kind of, you know, in the middle. It tells me the truth. It tells me what I need to hear. But it's not so slap you in the face and grab you by your ear, scream at you, or so quiet and barely there that you're just like, huh? Yeah, whatever. Maybe later. This is something I can be comfortable with and sit up and pay attention to without getting irritated or annoyed or, you know, in denial a lot of the times. So I love this as a shadow work deck. Now, will there be something else in my collection that comes along that does the job better? Yeah, possibly. But for right now, Magical Dogs Tarot, it is. All right, moving on. Question 15. What deck do you love in theory but not in practice? Okay, we're going to bring this back in. Again, the Tarot of Vampires. I really wanted to love this deck. I wanted to be all about this deck. I wanted it to be my go-to because I'm a sucker for vampires. I mean, every B-rated vampire movie I've probably seen. It's just one of those things. However, this deck is, yeah, did not meet expectations, did not hold out as much as I wanted it to, and which is a shame because Ann Daniels did a lovely job with the artwork. I love the artwork. We'll keep it for the artwork. Hope I find some place in my collection and practice to continue using this deck. However, I no longer have high expectations or hopes for this deck of it being a top contender or a go-to deck for any particular subject matter. You know, I don't expect it to be my number one shadow deck ever. I don't expect it to be a deck that I would go to for my own personal readings. So it's just, yeah. Would love to love it and use it in the way I wanted to, but yeah. Theory and practice are two different things. So we're just going to have to suck it up, Buttercup, because that's not what reality is when it comes to this particular deck. I wanted to love it so much more. Okay, what deck would you never use to read for someone else is question number 16. And number 17 is what deck would you never use for yourself? I'm going to answer both of these with the same deck because I have a deck that I don't use. This is the Tarot Familiars. Number one, I didn't realize anything about counterfeit decks. This is one of those ones that I got a hold of, and it took me forever to realize that this was a counterfeit deck. And I've never purchased this deck as a legit deck, simply because this is a pip deck. For those of you that are not familiar with this deck, it is very much a pip deck. So all the majors through here are illustrated, and it's a 4-language deck. I love the majors. They're pretty, and that's what I saw, and I thought the whole thing was illustrated. And I was like, hey, cool, an animal deck. And then I got the deck and realized it was a pip deck. I didn't know the meanings well enough that, you know, that to be comfortable with it. The court cards are illustrated. And because it's a counterfeit deck, it did not come with a guidebook. Wasn't comfortable using it. So this is a deck that I didn't bother getting a legit copy. This is a deck that actually I tear it apart. I tear this apart for when I need a tarot card and spell work. So if I am doing a spell that involves, you know, karma, maybe I'll pull the Justice card, or maybe I will find the World card, and use the World card in a spell. You know, I disassemble this deck. I don't use this to read at all. So this is one of those in my collection, but doesn't have a purpose. Doesn't get used deck for the sake of tarot reading. So I won't use this deck for myself for reading tarot. I won't use this deck for anyone else for reading tarot. And I still don't have the urge to purchase this deck as a legit copy to replace this counterfeit one that I accidentally bought and didn't realize that it was a counterfeit deck. So I've repurposed it. It's a tear apart deck. It's one of those that if I use it in a spell, the card is ruined. Oh well, don't care. And that's actually something that I guess is one of the best things to use counterfeit decks for. Just tear it apart, use it in artwork, do whatever with it. But yeah, I don't read with the Tarot Familiars. I just don't. Okay, and question number 18 already. Okay, what deck could you not bring yourself to buy? Okay. I basically have been gifted a lot of decks. I've purchased a lot of decks. I will go ahead and name a deck that is not in my collection that I have no interest in buying. So I could never bring myself to buy it because it's not my aesthetic. It's kind of gross and just, I mean, it's a niche deck and the urge is not there. It's actually kind of disgusting. And that's the Garbage Pail Kids Tarot. I know it's a spoof with the whole Cabbage Patch Kids thing, and Garbage Pail Kids was a thing, but to me it's just kind of, gross. Not really cool, as you could say. And I just don't ever foresee myself being anywhere near that area of niche and genre to purchase that deck. So, Garbage Pail Kids. Sorry, I won't pop up a picture. You'll just Google it if you're not familiar with it. And we'll move on. What's your favorite Pip deck? Okay, we're going to go ahead and bring you back to a deck I've already showed you. The Nightmare Before Christmas. I have very few Pip decks. But because I had such a wonderful experience with this one, I'm now more open to Pip decks. So we'll see. Maybe this one will be replaced as a favorite Pip deck. Maybe I will find something else that works better than this one even for reading. But for now, it's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Because it's a Pip deck I can read from. I can read intuitively from it if I need to. And it's fine. We're kosher. We like this deck. Okay, what's the deck that slaps you with the truth? Oh boy. Okay. Heaven and Earth Tarot. Believe it or not, Heaven and Earth Tarot was the deck that I actually learned tarot on. So when the Tarot of Vampires turned out not to be the deck for me to learn tarot on, I purchased the Heaven and Earth Tarot. And I basically hammered it out. I figured it out. And as you can see, there's some damage to my deck because it got heavy usage. It still gets heavy usage. And the strength of this deck in my hands is spirituality. This used to be my #1 spirituality deck. However, that has been replaced. And it's because this deck is a bit harsh. And it doesn't feel as comforting or comfortable as I would like. But this is a deck that will totally call me out. And it won't pull punches. It's usually pretty precise. And yes, it can, sorry, but knock me on my butt sometimes. And since I've purchased the Unfolding Path Tarot, I have the indie version because the Unfolding Path Tarot is not released as of yet for mass market. I have the indie version. And it's a mother energy. So out of the Maiden, Mother, and Crone, I would call it mother energy. And it's comforting. It's nice. It's gentler. I mean, it gets the point across, but it approaches it in a different way. Whereas this will, you know, be all about it. So I have to say, if I want the cold hard truth, if I don't want a deck that holds my hand, a lot of the times that will literally tell me, hey, you're not putting your energy where you need to, you're procrastinating and you're being overly emotional. This is the deck that would flat out say it like that. and to get up off my butt and do something about it. This is the deck that does that. Which is funny. But it's the way it is for the deck. Okay, and I do believe we have one more question. Yes, we do. Okay. Question 21. What's the deck that got away? Okay. I did not realize this was on Kickstarter. I missed the campaign. And even though it was in the Etsy shop, all the copies were sold out. And that is the Tarot of Oneness. However, Robin Voicey decided to do a second printing of the Tarot of Oneness. How I missed this on the original Kickstarter, I don't know. Maybe I didn't look at Kickstarter for a while. Maybe I was distracted with other things. But this is a different perspective, and I started craving that. And I found the Tarot of Oneness, but it was all sold out. And that was a bummer. I was all like, oh, I want it. I want it. And then like less than 2 weeks later, Robin decided to announce that she was going to do a second printing and she was going to end up taking pre-orders within like a week. And I was like, score! So even though this deck originally got away from me and I thought there was no hope of ever getting it, because Robin decided to do a second printing and make it available again, thank God, I was able to snag this. So the deck that got away eventually has been caught. It just took a bit. And that is fantastic. I love it. Different perspective. I love the colors. I love the extra cards. I've actually only did one reading out of this deck so far since I got it. Amazingly enough. And that's after I forced myself to wait a month and a half before I reached for it. And I did a daily tarot reading using this deck. And it was a very beautiful reading right off the bat. I even ended up with some of the extra cards, the additional cards in that reading. And I hadn't read the guidebook, but I still was able to read with this right out of the box. So this is a fabulous deck. I love this deck. I love that 8 of Cups too. So the difference in perspective, the readability, I'm so happy that Robin decided to do a second printing. And I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for dolphins, so every time I see this Chariot card, I have to pause and just oogle it for a minute. But I love that I was able to get a copy of this. And after having it in hands, to be able to start experiencing this deck, to see it in person, I would not be surprised if this deck doesn't go mass market. I expect this deck to go mass market at some point. Whether it's, you know, a year from now, 3 years from now. If Robin doesn't do like a 3rd, 4th, 5th printing of this deck, I would suspect that she's made a deal for this to be printed mass market. This is the type of deck, the quality of deck that I would fully expect to be mass market and be a very successful one. And last I knew, she still had copies of this available in her Etsy store for those that missed out on the first time, or the leftovers from the Kickstarter. Please double check her Etsy shop, and also look out for maybe her doing a 3rd printing if you missed it out on the first and then second time. Alright, my lovelies, if you've made it this far for these 21 questions, thank you so much. I will try to stop babbling now. As I said earlier, I will put the prompts, the 21 questions, in the description box below. If you would like to copy and paste and use them in your own VR for Lisa, go ahead and do so. In fact, if you want to tag me in your own description box so I watch your video, that would be fabulous. I would love to watch them. Anyway, thank you so much for watching so far, and I will see you guys later. Bye.